On the 7th of April 2026, Sarah Langs, the official statistician for Major League Baseball, posted a 2-line update that broke the sport's own framework for measuring greatness. Shohei Ohtani had the longest active scoreless inning streak among starting pitchers in baseball, and the longest active on-base streak in all of baseball. Same player, same day, same nervous system. She posted both facts together because she had to, because the sport does not have a category for them existing simultaneously. Longest active scoreless innings among starters belongs in one tracking column. Longest active on-base streak belongs in a completely different one. These metrics exist in separate universes. No one had ever needed to check whether a single player could hold the top position in both at once. They coexisted 32.2 consecutive innings without allowing a single earned run. That is the pitching side. 53 consecutive games reaching base safely. That is the hitting side. 2 streaks, 1 body. The sport has produced dominant pitchers. The sport has produced dominant hitters. Across 113 years of recorded modern baseball, it had never produced one nervous system holding the league lead in both categories at the same moment. What you are looking at is not a great season. It is something the sport has no historical template for. Before we establish what each streak means in isolation, before we place them inside the records they are sitting on top of, there is one question this video is going to answer. What kind of nervous system makes this possible? Hold on to that. The answer is worth it. To understand why the simultaneity is the actual story, you need to know what each streak means on its own terms. Start with the pitching. Through his first several starts of the 2026 season, Ohtani's ERA sat at 0.97. The league average ERA in 2026 is approximately 4.1. That gap is not a margin of separation. It is a categorical difference. The average major league starter allows 4 times more earned runs per 9 innings than Ohtani allowed across 37 total innings of work. 4 earned runs, not 4 per game. 4 runs total across the entire month of starts. His whip was 0.81, second in all of baseball. His strikeout to walk ratio was 42-9. For every walk he issued, he struck out nearly 5 batters. In a sport where a 3.5 ERA qualifies you for award consideration, Ohtani spent the first month of 2026 pitching at a level that makes a 3.5 look like a down year. Those numbers, standing alone, would anchor a strong video. Then there is the hitting side. 53 consecutive games reaching base safely. That is the number that broke Ichiro Suzuki's record. Ichiro held the mark for players born in Japan appearing in MLB at 43 consecutive games, set in 2009. The all-time MLB mark is 63 consecutive games, set by Orlando Cabrera in 2006. Ohtani, at 53, was inside that conversation. For anyone who watched Japanese players cross to this league and establish their place in its history over the past 2 decades, Ichiro's 43 was not just a number, it was the standard, the benchmark that measured excellence for an entire generation. Ohtani passed it. The bar was already legendary. At the same moment, Ohtani was carrying the longest active scoreless inning streak in baseball. He was carrying the longest active on-base streak in baseball. Eno Saris, who analyzes hitting mechanics for The Athletic and Fangraphs, has documented that Ohtani's average bat speed registers at 75.4 miles per hour. Elite tier production. The same body producing that bat speed is also engineering a curveball designed to make elite hitters chase pitches 3 feet off the plate. But here is the detail that makes neither streak make sense on its own. A pitcher protecting a scoreless inning streak through a full month of starts is supposed to conserve energy between appearances, limit physical output between outings, keep the workload calibrated. Ohtani walked into the batter's box after every start and took full competitive at-bats in every game that followed. The two streaks were not happening in parallel. They were happening through the same body, in the same daily calendar, against the same competition. To understand why that has no modern precedent, you need 113 years of pitching history and 2 records that defined what the sport believed was possible before April 2026. The record that defines the ceiling of this conversation is Hershiser's 59 consecutive scoreless innings, set in September of 1988. Hershiser threw 5 straight shutouts to close the Los Angeles Dodgers regular season, erasing Don Drysdale's mark of 58.2 innings, which had itself erased Walter Johnson's 55 2/3 innings, set back in 1913. 3 names, 3 generations. 75 years between the first record and the last one. In the 38 years since Hershiser set the bar, no starting pitcher has come within 10 innings of it. Ohtani's 32.2 innings in 2026 is not the ceiling. It is the fastest ascent toward that ceiling the sport has seen in nearly 4 decades. Built while taking full competitive at-bats every single day the schedule allowed. Then there is Babe Ruth. Before Ruth became the defining power hitter of the 20th century, he was one of the most dominant left-handed starters of the dead ball era. His scoreless inning streak across World Series competition reached 29.2 innings, spanning 3 appearances for the Boston Red Sox from October 1916 through September 1918. That mark stood for 43 years before Whitey Ford of the New York Yankees cleared it in 1961 with 33 consecutive scoreless World Series innings. Ohtani crossed Ruth's volume in the 2026 regular season against modern lineups. The stages are different. World Series competition and regular season competition carry different weights in different contexts. But volume is volume. The number of consecutive innings a starting pitcher can lock down without allowing a single earned run is a measure of sustained dominance that does not change based on which month the calendar shows. ESPN's Jeff Passan, who has tracked the full arc of this two-way experiment since its beginning, has consistently placed Ohtani's pitching work inside the weight of that historical lineage. The volume is real. The records it is measuring itself against are real. That context does not get smaller the longer Ohtani keeps going. What most of the coverage of this moment missed is the framing underneath it. Every time the sport faces a pitcher protecting a scoreless streak across multiple starts, the conversation centers on sustainability, on when the regression arrives. From 2022 through 2024, that conversation applied to Ohtani in a specific way. When does he choose? When does the two-way window close? When does the body force a decision? That framing had a flaw. It assumed the sport had already tested whether a two-way player at the highest level was physically sustainable. The sport had. It just chose not to remember the results. The results were documented. They were tracked. They are now in the Seamheads Negro Leagues database, a record system that Major League Baseball officially recognized as part of the historical record. Neil Payne, who has written about baseball history for 538 and contributed to the Saber Biography Project, framed Ohtani's place inside this tradition with precision. Payne noted that there was another player who essentially did what Ohtani is doing right now, Bullet Joe Rogan of the Kansas City Monarchs. In the 1920s and 1930s, Ohtani, Payne observed, is joining a club that Bullet Rogan founded. Consider what Rogan actually did. In the 1925 Negro League season, Rogan went 15-2 as a pitcher. His ERA was 1.74, leading the league. He threw 15 complete games and posted 4 shutouts, including a 4-0 victory in Game 7 of the playoff series against the St. Louis Stars. At the plate, he hit 338 with an on-base percentage of 413 and a slugging percentage of 521. His OPS plus that season was 155. That means he was 55% more productive at the plate than the average hitter in his league. Across his 5-year career, Rogan finished with an ERA of 2.66, a career ERA plus of 142, 51 home runs, and 111 stolen bases. Then there is Martin Dihigo, known across Latin America and Cuba as El Maestro. Dihigo posted an ERA of 2.5 inches, 1,927. He played more than 235 innings at positions other than pitcher across his career, including all 3 outfield spots, every infield position, and 6 innings as a catcher in 1929. Not as an experiment, as a contributor. These men were never permitted into the same historical conversation as Babe Ruth or Walter Johnson. The structure of the sport at the time made that impossible. Their records existed in separate documentation, in separate leagues, tracked by researchers and historians, and eventually compiled into the Seamheads database that MLB now treats as official. What Ohtani is doing in 2026 is not a discovery. It is a confirmation. The two-way player at the highest level of the game is not a modern invention and not a phase. It is a tradition the sport buried, and Ohtani is making it impossible to bury again. Rogan and Dihigo proved it was biologically possible. What Ohtani did in April 2026 is explain with StatCast precision exactly how the mechanics of the 32.2 consecutive scoreless innings begin with a curveball. According to StatCast tracking data from the 2026 season, Ohtani's curveball produces 30 inches of vertical drop and 20 inches of horizontal movement. His fastball and sinker peak at 100 to 101 miles per hour. His curveball arrives 23.5 miles per hour slower. That differential is not a stylistic choice. It is a biological trap. The human eye begins tracking a pitch in the first 100 milliseconds of its flight. The brain reads the initial velocity and commits the body to a swing decision before the ball has traveled halfway to the plate. When Ohtani releases a fastball at 100 miles per hour, the hitter's nervous system prepares accordingly. When the curveball arrives 23.5 miles per hour slower with 30 inches of downward drop, the commitment has already been locked in. The swing is already gone. The pitch lands where no bat can follow. Jose Altuve, one of the most consistent contact hitters in the American League, chased an Ohtani curveball 3.23 feet outside the strike zone. That measurement ranks among the most extreme documented whiffs in 4 years of StatCast data. Altuve did not swing at a bad pitch. He swung at a pitch his nervous system was convinced was going somewhere. It never arrived. Ohtani deploys that curveball as one of 7 pitch types communicated through a 9-button PitchCom device on his wrist. The engineer who developed that system has noted publicly that the device was expanded from 5 buttons to 9 at the suggestion of Yu Darvish, whose arsenal of nearly 12 pitch types demanded more options than the original design allowed. Ohtani inherited a communication system built to the specifications of the previous most complex pitcher in the game. He filled every slot it offered. The numbers are absurd. The body making those pitches from the mound is the same body that Eno Saris, analyzing StatCast bat speed data for The Athletic and Fangraphs, Documented averaging 75.4 miles per hour on swings in the batter's box. The bat path averages 7.3 feet in length. Elite tier production in both directions. The nervous system that engineers the 23.5 mile per hour velocity trap on one side of the diamond is the same nervous system generating that bat speed on the other. When Ohtani's on-base streak ended at 53 consecutive games, Nikon Sports framed the moment around loss. 6 scoreless innings, the Japanese outlet reported, but the consecutive on-base record has stopped. The language centered on what was given up. That framing had the priority backwards. The pitching was the priority. The on-base streak was something this sport was receiving as a secondary return without asking for it and without accounting for it in any historical framework. When the pitching reached its highest output in a given start, the streak reflecting secondary effort was the one that ended. That is not a loss. That is a hierarchy making itself visible. From 2022 through 2024, a consistent sector of baseball media ran the same question about Ohtani. When does he choose? When does the two-way window force a reckoning? When does the body make the decision the player refuses to make? The question carried an assumption underneath it that sustaining elite production in both roles simultaneously was a temporary condition, that the math would eventually collect what was owed. The 2026 answer is a 0.97 ERA. It is 32.2 consecutive scoreless innings. It is a 5-3 game on-base streak running at the same time. Anyone who put that question on record now has the data sitting in front of them. The body made no forced decision. Ohtani made every decision, and every one of them produced this. And all of that brings us to the only question left worth asking about April 2026. The question from the beginning of this video was about a nervous system. What kind of nervous system makes this possible? Holding the longest active scoreless inning streak among starting pitchers in baseball, while simultaneously holding the longest active on-base streak in all of baseball. 2 opposing demands on one body, both met at the highest level in the sport at the same time. The answer is not a training protocol. It is not a StatCast optimization program or a biomechanical adjustment or a recovery regimen. Those things exist and they contribute. They are not the answer. The answer is that the sport spent 113 years building a framework that assumed no one would ever need both columns filled at once. Bullet Rogan filled them in 1925, and the sport was not watching. Martin Dihigo filled them across 2 decades, and the sport looked away. The framework held because the evidence was kept out of the room where the framework was written. Ohtani put the evidence in every room at once. A top comment tracking this moment on the baseball community boards in April 2026 described it the way direct observation often does. The commenter noted that Ohtani had 2 of the longest streaks running at the same time as a hitter and as a pitcher, and called it incredible. That reaction, shared across thousands of readers, is the accurate one. Sarah Langs published both numbers side by side on April 7 because the sport had no separate filing system for what she was looking at. She authenticated something the record books had never needed a category for. The same statistician who opened this story is the one who confirmed it was real while it was happening. The 5-6 game hitting streak. Hershiser's September 1988. There are events in this sport that collapse decades of probability into a single body over a compressed period of time. History does not produce them on a schedule. History does not send advance notice while they are unfolding. We are watching one right now. Which record does history talk about first? The 0.97 ERA or the 5-3 game on base streak? Tell me which one you are taking.